Well, good morning. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning. Good morning. I'm Morton Blackwell, president of the Leadership Institute, and it is my great pleasure to welcome you to this, our December Wednesday Wake Up Club breakfast. We live in interesting times. The newspapers this morning quote from a speech this week by one Howard Dean, who is now one party's leading candidate for their presidential nomination. In this speech, which was about Iran, Howard Dean 4 times said things like, "We have to put pressure on the Soviet Union, which is supplying nuclear materials and technology to the people in Iran, and we have leverage with the Soviet Union, and we should do this and that," which leads one to believe that he may not be ready for prime time. About Howard Dean, the most perspicacious thing which I have heard said was said by Zell Miller, the maverick Democrat senator from Georgia, who said that Howard Dean is combining the worst aspects of George McGovern's Peace at Any Price and Walter Mondale's I'll Increase Your Taxes. And on the other hand, this morning's paper also reports that the approval rating for the President of the United States has gone in the past week from 56% to 61%, no doubt influenced by the President's Thanksgiving Day trip to Iraq. So these really are interesting times. If you aren't signed up to receive monthly notification for our Wednesday Wake Up Club breakfast, please take a moment to fill out the breakfast registration form. You can drop that form, which is on your tables, next to the elevator as you exit here from the 3rd floor after the breakfast. You can purchase a copy of this morning's presentation or a number of the past Wednesday Wake Up Club breakfast on videotape. Our Center for Print and Broadcast Media will gladly provide you with as many of these tapes as you'd like for a mere $15 per tape. In 2003, to date, the Leadership Institute has trained 3,454 students, which compares to last year's total of 3,142 students, and we've held 137 different schools in this building and around the country. We've placed 15 conservative job seekers through our employment placement program to date this year. You have before you on the table our 2003 school schedule, what's left of it, and we're presenting to you the first draft of our schedule for 2004. We urge you to review these calendars as you get them and consider attending any of our programs. And now to lead us in an invocation and pledge of allegiance, I'm going to present Ty Bales, who has been sitting there next to our speaker and pulled out some ancient document from when Ty was a wee lad, where he had his picture taken with Governor Gilmore. Ty is the director of grassroots coalitions at the Leadership Institute, and he has helped train thousands of conservative activists to become more effective. In the fall of 2002, Ty was employed at the Republican National Committee's 72-hour task force to work on Mike Rogers' successful congressional race in the 3rd District of Alabama. And prior to joining the Leadership Institute, Ty worked for the George Landreth for Congress campaign in Virginia's 5th District, and he worked as an assistant to the candidate there. He also worked on Oliver North's Senate campaign and did work with Senator Allen when he was governor of Virginia. Ty grew up in Charlottesville and is a graduate of Hampton-Sydney College, which I think the slogan is, "Where men are gentlemen and ladies are guests." Ty, would you come and join us up here and lead us in an invocation and a pledge of allegiance?
Good morning. Thank you all for being here this morning. If you would please join me in bowing your heads for a quick prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you very much for the many blessings you've bestowed upon us. Thank you for this great country that you've given us and great commonwealth you've given us. Thank you for the leaders and the commonwealth that you've given us, and thank you that the governor's here to speak to us this morning. I pray that you please continue to bless our president and protect our troops overseas. In your name we pray. Amen. Amen. Please join me in standing for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much, Ty. And now I'm going to present to you Dan Labert, who will give us an update on the activities of the Programs Department. Dan is Executive Director of Political Technology here at the Leadership Institute, where he oversees the direction of our core schools, at the Center for Print and Broadcast Media, and the Employment Placement Service. Dan was practically born into politics, as his entire family is active, and he has successfully managed all their campaigns, including his mother's 1966 race for city council. Dan?
Good morning, everyone. I must mention that the 96 race for city council, running your mother for city council is probably the toughest thing I ever had to do. If you make a mistake, not only are you in trouble on the campaign, but don't expect dinner that night. But we won by 6 votes. There are 6 members in the family, 42,000 votes total, and we all voted absentee. I believe I learned that little trick at the Leadership Institute's youth leadership school, so our training does work. I am proud to say I know firsthand. Just to ducktail on what Morton said, we have trained 3,450 students, conservative students this year. Our core schools division, 500 students have been trained through 18 different training seminars. Conservative organizations in London and Canada also took an interest in our training and brought our training to their home areas. The Center for Print and Broadcast Media had a fantastic year. I'd like to name everyone that's here, but the only person I can point out is the person running the camera. I can't tell you how effective our Center for Print and Broadcast Media actually is. It's the Leadership Institute's effort to bring balance to liberal media. As we all know, we have a big job in front of us, but we do a great job at it. Our Effective Television Techniques Workshop graduated 400 conservatives this year, 11 United States congressmen. The Broadcast Journalism School graduated 125 students this year, representing 22 different colleges and universities around the country. Speaking of our Broadcast Journalism School, we also have a media placement service where we take the graduates of the Broadcast Journalism School and try to place them in television-related positions so that they can make a difference. Our attempt at training the next Dan Rather, but a conservative one. The next time you turn on Fox or CBS, look for graduates Adam Housley, who covered the war on terrorism based in Kuwait, and look for Tina Krause, who's with CBS, and know that they are fruits of the Leadership Institute's efforts. Our grassroots division, by far one of our best divisions here at the Leadership Institute. In August of this year, 3/4 of the way through this calendar year, more than 1,000 conservatives were given the tools they need to go out and run and win elections. A quick story that I know likes to be brought up. In Georgia alone, we took one of our grassroots schools there this year. 50 students attended. 26 of those 50 students won elections for state office that year. 16 freshmen, 10 incumbents. This is the 6th straight year that the Leadership Institute has trained more than 3,000 students. That is our goal for once again in 2004. And to quote Winston Churchill, give us the tools and we'll get the job done. Well, that's pretty much the same call for the conservative movement. the Leadership Institute hears that call, and we will once again do it in 2004. I would be remiss in failing to mention that none of this would be possible without the supporters of the Leadership Institute and the contributors to the Leadership Institute. So thank you very much. Have a good day, and Merry Christmas.
Thank you very much, Dan. And Ty is going to come up here now and introduce our speaker. I think the chances are pretty good that I've known him longer than anybody else in the room, because our speaker met when he was age 17 and a freshman at the University of Virginia. But Ty, you do the honors of giving a good intro to the governor.
There's no pressure there, right? I was extremely excited to get to introduce the governor, and such an awesome statesman. But what do you say about a man who everybody in this room knows all about Governor Gilmore? So I was thinking back to when was the first time that I got to meet Governor Gilmore. It was when he was Attorney General, and it was in the summer of 1994. And I went to Boys State, part of the American Legion's Boys State of Virginia, and it was held in Lynchburg, Virginia. And I pulled out last night my yearbook from Boys State here in Virginia. And I was remembering, there was tons of speakers there, great speakers there that summer that would come to speak to us. But the only speaker I could remember was Attorney General Gilmore, his speech. And then I was flipping through the book, and I ran across Governor Allen had a whole page with pictures in here, and Lieutenant Governor Byer had his pictures in here. And but for some reason, it was Attorney General Gilmore who stood out in my memory. And I think he was actually one of the most popular speakers to all the students there. And one of the reasons I think he was such a popular speaker is because all the boys there, all the students there, the young men, the high school students, boys, young men, whatever you want to call us at that point, we could relate to him. He brought us. He gave us hope. And I'm going to tell a little story that I think characterizes the leadership of Governor Gilmore. I hope he doesn't mind if I tell this story, but I think he may have told it to us then at Boys State, or I'd heard it sometime thereafter, but it was about 10 years ago that I heard this story, so you'll have to correct me if I miss it up a little bit. But we've got his bio in front of us. We all know about it. He attended University of Virginia undergrad, and they had a great weekend in football because they beat the Hokies this last weekend, bringing the Commonwealth Cup back to Charlottesville where it belongs. But after graduating from University of Virginia, he went on to serve in the military, in the Army and counterintelligence in West Germany, and he came back to Virginia and he wanted to attend law school. And he wanted to attend the University of Virginia Law School. What other law school is there in Virginia? But the dean there at the university didn't have the same ideas. And Governor Gilmore wasn't admitted into the law school at first, and he was put on the wait list. Apparently, they didn't see his leadership potential. They couldn't tell that he was going to be the future governor of Virginia just by looking at the paper application. But this is a story of determination and a story of never giving up and achieving your goals. So then future governor did not give up, and he went to go visit the dean personally. Went to the law school personally, pleading his case. I still wouldn't let him in. And he went back and back and back. And finally, I think classes actually had even started that fall. I think. And he still hadn't let him in. He was still on the wait list. And he went back again. I want to go to law school here. Let me in. And they finally let him in. But I think it's an awesome story because it talks about his determination. He had a goal, and he's going to go out there and achieve it. And it's a great characterization of the kind of leader he is today, and the leader he's been in the Commonwealth of Virginia. Nobody thought he would become Attorney General, and he did it. And then certainly nobody thought he would be a popular lieutenant governor to become governor. I think one time, Lieutenant Governor Byer had about a 20-point lead at one time in that race and beat him. So Governor Gilmore's strong determination and willingness to not accept no for an answer and to go after his goals is an awesome story, and it's a great story that we can all relate to. I hope we can relate to. And it's a pleasure to have him here this morning. It's an honor. Thank you for coming. Please, let's welcome Governor Gilmore.
Thank you very much. Well, Ty, thank you very much. It's a delight to be here, and I appreciate your kind words. You know, I look around the room. I asked, you know, who's going to be here this morning that I'm going to talk to. You always want to understand who your audience is, and I was told it's going to be the students of the Leadership Institute and some donors, and then a variety of curmudgeons. I think I can tell who's who. I wonder if you can. It's true. Most of what Ty said was true in terms of the introduction. He was at Boys State. The Boys and Girls State experience was one of the great experiences, really, that anybody can have when you're a statewide public official. All three, the governor, the lieutenant governor, the attorney general, all get to go to Boys and Girls State. And, you know, the Boys State was always pretty easy, to tell you the truth. They were all loaded up by the hundreds and hundreds and hundreds in this giant basketball stadium. It's always the same thing, and it's had this very pretentious stand elevated way up, and that was really pretty easy to do. They were all excited and, you know, full of testosterone and all that kind of stuff, and they were all very, very, excited, and it was not that tough. He said that it was easy to relate, and it sort of was. On the other hand, Girls State. Looking back now on all the speeches that I've given, it seemed to me, and it got easier and easier to give speeches as the years wore on, it was always hard to do Girls State. Always hard. They didn't meet in a big basketball stadium. They met in a very small, confined auditorium. And they were there by the hundreds and hundreds and hundreds. Now, you know, how does a guy get up on a stage and relate to about 1,000 young women? How do you do that? And I never solved it. Roxanne says I never solved it, but you know. But it was really a tremendous experience to speak at both Girls and Boys State. Now, I have known Morton a very long time. I became associated when I was a youth of 17. Morton was 60 at the time, and robbed Helen from the cradle. And I have looked to Morton for his guidance and his leadership, it seems, my entire life. When others waver in their philosophy and their beliefs, Morton is a rock, has always been that way. And people, young people particularly, can look up to Morton and feel like that this is not a man who is going to waver with the wind and change his philosophy and change his position for opportunistic reasons. This is not Morton Blackwell. This is not Helen Blackwell. These are people who stand by their philosophy, and you can count on it year after year. And you know, there's something good about that. There's something dramatically good about the solidness, about the reliability of that, particularly in a time of politics right now when everything seems to just blow in the wind, it seems, from time to time. So I'm proud to have associated with the Leadership Institute, to have been in classes at the Leadership Institute, to be a part of this. And so when I was invited to come and speak this morning, it was my pleasure to do it. Let me run through a bio. And the reason I want to do this is because I'm going to get through this point, hopefully as quick as I can, and leave some time for some questions and answers and some back and forth, because I think that's part of the real fun of speaking to groups like this. I finished UVA in foreign policy and then joined the Army and became an intelligence agent and served in West Germany. I was taught German at Monterey, the Monterey Language School, and then went to West Germany and served as an intelligence agent there for a couple of years. Then went back to the University of Virginia Law School. Aside from the standard lawyer-like things, actually his story is true. UVA at that time took 350 students. It's much bigger now, but they took 350 students in each class. The year I got in, they took 351. Guess who was the bottom feeder? It's an absolute true story. I studied, for example, issues like terrorism, international law and terrorism issues when I was at the law school. When I finished there, I went into private practice of law, and I was a trial lawyer for a period of 10 years. I actually went to courtrooms representing individuals in a variety of different kinds of cases. I did criminal law, I did personal injury work, I did domestic relations work. And I tell you now, right here at the Leadership Institute, I will never again try another divorce case. Never. The rest of my life. I assure you of that. Then after those 10 years, I was elected to be the Commonwealth's attorney for Henrico County, which is the big county right outside of Richmond. Had about 25 lawyers, 25 prosecutors, and I went in there, and that was now, suddenly I was a trial lawyer and going into court and prosecuting cases, but I was also managing lawyers and trying to handle the public policy of the criminal law in a major jurisdiction here in Virginia. After that, I was elected to be the Attorney General of the state of Virginia, and nobody had ever gone from one of the local constitutional offices into state office before. I don't think that had ever happened. As a matter of fact, I was only the second Republican to ever be Commonwealth's attorney in Henrico County, and they ran the first Republican off. It's literally true. But they didn't run me off, and I managed to serve there for 4 years, managing that office, and then after 4 years was reelected, and then became the Attorney General of the state of Virginia. And then after 4 years there, I became the governor of the state of Virginia. Now, along the way, there are a couple of issues which I'll toss out that I've done some work in case you all have any questions about it. The first thing that happened was when I was governor, I was approached by some members of Congress who asked me if I would be willing to chair a congressional advisory commission on the issue of the internet and sales tax issues on the internet, on e-commerce. Now, I chaired that commission for a year. It was an exciting opportunity, but man, it was war, just war. There were two other governors that were on this panel, the governor of Utah, the governor of Washington. Both were put on the panel for the sole purpose of making sure that the commission would produce a report saying that there should be taxes on the internet. In addition to that, there were prominent national business leaders that were on this commission. By the way, Grover Norquist, who is a graduate of the Leadership Institute, was on the commission. He was an absolute tower of strength on the conservative side. But there were others. The business leaders, Dick Parsons of Time Warner, Bob Pittman at the time of America Online, Ted Waite of Gateway, people, Mike Armstrong at the time of AT&T, now he runs Comcast. These were the caliber of people who were on this commission, and I'm telling you, it was absolute war. Ferocious, bitter discussion about this. Now, many of you probably know that I was asked to also chair, a couple of years later, the National Advisory Panel to assess domestic response capabilities involving terrorism and weapons of mass destruction, and I still chair that commission. I want you all to know that compared to the Internet Commission, terrorism and weapons of mass destruction is a peach. Because you were really talking about big money when you were talking about the Internet and sales tax issues. Terrorism is just about death and radioactivity and stuff like that. But now that commission I have served on as chairman, the Terrorism Commission, for 5 years. That was a commission that I was approached on after the Internet Commission was over, actually, it's a very interesting story. I was actually doing a seminar with the governor of North Carolina on the issues of terrorism down in Williamsburg when I was approached by Dick Clark at the time of the National Security Council for President Clinton and Bill Cohen, who was the Secretary of Defense for Bill Clinton. And they came to me and they asked me if I would chair this commission. Well, you can imagine how surprised I was. I had a reputation at the time as a pretty partisan Republican governor, as many of you all know, and I was pretty amazed. In fact, I was the second most surprised person in America to be asked to chair that commission. The most surprised person in America that I was asked to chair the commission was Bill Clinton, I think. But nonetheless, I took that on, and that commission has again had 5 years. This has been a nonpartisan commission. It's police, fire, rescue, emergency services, intelligence officers, people who are retired military people, epidemiologists, healthcare, real people who are going to deal with the issues of homeland security. We started this in the beginning of 1999. We did a threat assessment in 1999. In the year 2000, we basically outlined the national strategy, the need for a national office, our concerns about intelligence sharing and the inability to do that, and some of the key issues about involving federal, state, and local people in the homeland security effort. In the year 2001, we decided we would focus our attention going at the door. It was a 3-year commission at the time. We said we're going to go to the door by focusing our attention on how you're going to use the locals, how you're going to actually get them involved in homeland security. What are you going to do about health care and the health care community? What are you going to do in the case of a bioterrorism attack? What do you do about border controls? What do you do about the use of the military in the homeland, which our commission believes is extremely dangerous. And in the absence of very thorough and careful planning, you could very easily get the enemy producing an environment in which you go to martial law very quickly in this country. So you have to be very careful about that. And then finally, cyber terrorism, and we were done. We sent the report off to the printer and said we're going to go to business early. We sent the report off to the printer the first week of September 2001. And of course, the attack occurred a week later. The commission was extended for an additional 2 years. In the 4th year, we focused a lot of attention on counterterrorism and intelligence gathering inside the United States and how you did that consistent with our civil freedoms. We recommended the Intelligence Fusion Center, which became the TTIC in this environment. And now we're in our 5th final year, and in fact, that report will be issued in 2 weeks. And then we're out of business again. That's a 5-year commission. The president, of course, as you probably know, asked me to be chairman of the National Committee. I did that for a year. I was very proud to be able to serve the party and to serve the country. So that gives you some feel for the, now, you know, here I've used up on bio all the time that I want to talk about. I don't want to do too much more of that. Let me instead talk to you about what I consider to be some of the key principles of leadership. This is what the Leadership Institute is about. Let me talk about just several principles that I think are important as all of you are trained to go into leadership positions, and almost all of you in this room have held leadership positions from time to time. Number one, I think that if you're going to run for office and you're going to be in public service, and in fact in everything you do in life, you got to keep your word. And you got to keep it when it's tough. Now, this is a very difficult thing. Ronald Reagan said, and I'm going to give you a quote on him, "A leader once convinced that a particular course of action is the right one must be undaunted when the going gets tough." I want you to know from personal experience that it is very easy for politicians to fold when the going gets tough. They'll say a lot of dramatic and bold things when they're on the campaign trail. But when the pressure gets on and the overwhelming culture to raise taxes and to increase the power of the state begins to come down on them, there's always this temptation to go into compromise and just to give and to give and to give. And the people who are in favor of bigger government and more taxation and that kind of approach to life will always be trying to pull you more and more to their position into the center. It seems to me that if you intend to follow that line of thinking and governance, then you ought to tell people at the beginning. You ought to tell people and campaign on it and then keep your word when it's all over with. And if you decide that you're going to run as a conservative and you're going to stand by conservative principles, you have to do what you say you're going to do. As all of you all know, I ran on a very broad-based campaign plan when I was running for governor. It was very varied. It dealt with the issue of economic development, education, and so on. But the one thing people remember is the car tax cut. And people talk to me about it almost every day. I've never seen anything like it. Total strangers talk to me about the car tax cut and how they got the bill and how happy they are that they don't have to pay all of that. I've had people approach me in foreign states someplace to tell me they've heard about the car tax cut. As we know, it's been a powerful issue in California, even still to this day. But you have to keep your word, and the going got really tough on the car tax cut. And why was that? Well, it was because that some of the politicians, including some prominent Republicans, didn't think they had a real stake in the car tax cut. They had a stake in getting as much revenue in as possible and spending everything that they could spend. That was their position. They didn't feel like they had the stake in it. So there has been opposition. You got to stick by your principles. And my approach to the people within my government, as we were watching the revenues and the recession was beginning to kick in, I basically said, look, the people will not be the first to go overboard here. My question is, can we continue to phase out this tax in a reasonable way and operate government in a reasonable way? And basically, I gave my staff people the admonition to go do that. And they came back with a responsible plan. And at that point, I didn't take the excuse of saying, gee, we're in a recession, so I think we'll stop the car tax cut. We proceeded with it because we kept our promise. We kept our word. That's what you need to do. And then a second thought I've got is that I think you have to stand on some principle. Now, if you really observe a lot of candidacies out there, I think that you will see frequently that people want to be in public office, but they don't really, if they're asked, why do you want to be X, president, governor, senator, and so on like that, very frequently they're puzzled. They can't answer that question. Have you seen that? That's a frequent trick of the press. They get some guy or gal, off guard, and they say, why do you want to be, and they can't answer the question. If you've trained at a place like the Leadership Institute, if you have been a reader of political thought, you have developed certain conservative principles. If you stick by those principles and you stand by them, you're in a position to articulate a vision of what you want to do. And I think you should stick by your principles. And it is very easy to compromise your principles, particularly, once again, in the pressures of public life. The third thing is that I think that you have to be in a position to articulate a vision. You have to be able to translate those principles into what you really want to see happen. In my case, I believed that we should be able to demonstrate that you could govern as a conservative and still move things ahead. The left has a tendency to capture certain concepts and words and hold on to them and take them for themselves because they are very good concepts. One is progressivism. Now, I don't want to give Morton hives here, but with this word. But people generally do want to see public officials progress things. They want to see things move along. And they want to see problems solved. They want to see the quality of life of people improved. But the old line of thinking is that you just simply tax everything you can tax and spend everything you can spend, and that's progress. They have defined that as progress. Conservatives ought not to surrender on that. We ought to be able to demonstrate that we can lead and move things forward and be progressive through conservative principles. And I believe that. So instead of taking the principle that you grab everything you can grab from people and spend it, my philosophy was that you keep as much in the pockets of working men and women as you could so that they could actually do some things and get some capital together, get a little down payment so they could then make a bank loan and do the fundamental things that you have to do. But meanwhile, if government is taking away all that marginal increase from people and doing more and more and more, they're constantly keeping people down. That's what they want to do, because then, of course, people become more dependent upon the state, and as time goes on, the state has to get bigger to accommodate them. They don't want the independence of people, and conservatives do. To the greatest extent possible, we want people to be in a position to stand on their own feet to the greatest extent possible. And that's what we should govern like. And that's why I did the car tax cut, in order to get some money actually back into the pockets of working men and women. So I had a vision about this. And let me tell you, it wasn't just the car tax. K through 12 education, we developed standards. Now, Governor Allen, before me, established the position that we ought to have standards, but in Virginia, you only get one 4-year term. That's it. And it was impossible for him to do more than articulate the need for standards. We had to actually implement the standards. And we did that. We chose to do that, and we put the standards in place. On colleges, we cut tuitions, froze tuitions, and then cut tuitions. But at the same time, we made a priority within the budget that said that we would, in fact, put some additional funding into colleges so that they weren't going to suffer necessarily a loss, but that this was basically a transfer back into the parents of students. Because if you were holding colleges harmless in terms of their money and you were cutting tuitions, then you were basically giving more money back into to the parents. Now, I could give you a separate lecture on colleges, and I will do that one of these days. They never have enough, right? It's not possible. If you say to the colleges, we'll give you $1 billion, they'll say, no, I need 12. And you say, okay, I'll give you 12 billion. They'll say, no, I need 24. There's just no limit to this, so that's another story for another day, and we'll have some fun with that. I believed in accountability for education. I believed in transportation initiatives that needed to be done. The Wilson Bridge was something that was just a dream when I became governor, and we were able to go forward and begin to put that together. So I believed in doing some of these things. I believed that the African American colleges in Virginia had been neglected for 100 years and they needed to have additional support. We gave them additional support, but we applied accountability to everybody in every way while we were doing it. Technology. I established the first technology secretary because I believed that Virginia had an opportunity to lead the nation in an exciting moment in technology, and we were able to do that. So you have to create some type of vision, and you can govern, believe me, on conservative principles, and you can persuade the people that our way of doing things is better. Then the fourth and last point, don't pass up the opportunity to lead. Now, I've thought about this for the last couple of days. I was thinking about coming up here. A lot of people get into office, and then when the going gets really tough and there's opposition, sometimes violent opposition from people in public office, from within your own party, from people within the news media, that if you're doing something that isn't completely orthodox, like raise taxes and spend all the time, then you know, they get pretty mad with you. And you have to not pass up the opportunity to lead. Isn't it a tragedy to think that you're going to spend your life trying to prepare yourself and get elected to a public office and then not doing anything with it? Because you're afraid that somehow you might become unpopular? Or somebody might be mad with you? Or there might be an editorial against you? Or there might be a news article that calls you a bad name and criticizes you and says that you're stupid or something of that nature? You can't back off from that. You can't pass up the gift of office. If you have it, you have to use it. You have to actually try to do something with it. Not be passive, not be scared, and not be the kind of person who says, I'm going to go along to get along to remain popular and look to the next office. My philosophy was always do the best job you can do in the office you have, and only then would the public ever consider advancing you to an additional office. But yet we have a tendency today to see leaders who pass up the opportunity to lead. What a waste. Never do that. Bear down, put the bit in your teeth, and be prepared to accept the criticism, get the skin thicker, and just go forward. And that is the key point. And that, of course, takes you to this budget issue that we've got in Virginia today. What a tragedy. What a tragedy that people feel like that they have to raise taxes at this point in time when the people of Virginia are already paying enormous amounts of money between federal, state, and local taxes, tremendous amounts of money. No discussion at all on the expenditure side. Just we've got to have more revenue, more revenue, more revenue. And it's a tragedy. When I was governor, there weren't but two vehicles for saving money, from keeping the legislature from spending every last dime. That's all. Two vehicles. It's all that exists. Number one, the rainy day fund, which we maxed out under my administration. I got it up to almost $1 billion. And the second vehicle was the car tax cut. More money back to the people through giving them car tax cuts. And that's it. And today, there are no other vehicles to keep the legislature from spending every single dime. If the governor says, I think I'll maybe put $100 million in the bank over here and just save it, won't spend it, forget it. The legislature's going to spend every dime. The needs, so-called needs, the demands on the state budget always were quintuple and 5 times what the resources would be. So you're just dreaming if you don't think they're going to spend it all. So we have to find ways to prevent that from happening. And one way to do that is tax cuts back to the working men and women so they can spend some of their own money. And finally, we shouldn't tolerate people who manage in order to create the result of a tax increase. And we see that. We see that all the time. When I was governor and the pressure was on me to increase taxes, I basically said, no, I'm going to manage this budget so that we can accomplish what we need to accomplish, and we are not going to raise taxes. We're going to put ourselves in that confined restriction, and that forces us to do the job better. You can do it another way, you know. You can, when the pressure is on, manage as badly as possible and hurt as many people as you possibly can in order to send the message to the people that they're going to be hurt unless they increase taxes. For example, closing the Division of Motor Vehicle offices in Northern Virginia. Now, there's a dirty little secret here. The Division of Motor Vehicles is a self-supporting agency. In fact, it makes a profit. So when you cut the Division of Motor Vehicles, you're denying the state revenue. You're not saving anything. But yet that was happening. Why was that? Why was that? Why would you do something like that? In order to inflict as much injury as possible on the people, so that they would then vote for a referendum for a sales tax increase, right? So you can do it one of two ways. You can manage as good as possible so that you avoid the necessity of a tax increase, or you can manage as badly as possible in order to persuade the people that they must increase taxes. Those are the two philosophies that are at work that we have seen. Managing to do bad and managing to do good. You have to understand those kinds of principles. Well, I'm done. I'll give you one last quote and one last thought. And that is that another quote that I have here is a fellow by the name of Blaine Lee. I don't know who that is, by the way, Blaine Lee. I hope he's not a communist or something like that. But there's a quote here. He says, "The great leaders are like the best conductors. They reach beyond the notes to reach the magic of the players." Well, I think that's what the Leadership Institute does. I think the Leadership Institute trains young people to reach to the magic that's in people, the opportunity to reach into the soul and to what really people believe in, and to go beyond technique and to really reach to the heart and soul of young people who come through the Leadership Institute. And that will be an enduring legacy for people like Morton and Helen, who will actually train a whole cadre of young people who will come up through the ranks and then will reach for that magic in the soul that is good for people. So thank you very much for the chance to be here with you today. How much time do we have, Morton? Well, a few minutes?
Sure. Questions?
Would you like me to call on people? I shall. We'll start with you.
As a former educator, and the premise, education is the foundation of our society. We lack leadership on the national, state, and local levels. The NEA is the biggest union, the Trojan horse, as far as education is concerned. What are your suggestions for our actually training these children instead of warehousing them? Giving them an education so they can be leaders. What are your suggestions and what leadership can you give us?
Let me give you several thoughts about this. First of all, the teachers union is a problem. And I went to see them and I talked with them and I tried to find some kind of common ground, but they actually are an adjunct of the Democratic Party. And you just got to kind of recognize it. There's nothing you can do about it. Every now and then they'll endorse a Republican who is running on a post or something like that in order to keep their image up. But they are an adjunct of the Democratic Party, and it's very sad because the rank and file members who either pay dues or are forced to pay dues aren't necessarily Democrats and support the philosophy of the Democratic Party and those candidates. So there's a real disassociation there. The teachers union supports increased salaries for teachers, and that's it. I could never find any other agenda besides that in the teachers union. But there are things that you can do in education. I have a big thought and a little thought. The big thought is the one that we actually implemented, which is standards. People said that standards couldn't work. Teaching is an art, and education is an art. And I'm not trying to undermine the importance of teachers. I think the teachers union should play to their strength, which is the people that is in the teachers unions, instead of just trying to constantly grab for money, which is the only program that the union has. I think that a good teacher produces good students, and a lousy teacher makes it very difficult for students to succeed. And I think that's been my experience, and I suspect that has been your experience. But the truth of the matter is that if you're going to deal with education at the top, and you have to look down and try to understand exactly how you're going to improve on a mass level, there is no answer other than standards, in my view, and creating something that is measurable. And then if you've got kids that are having trouble meeting those standards, then at least you know that you have an obligation to focus additional teaching resources and your best teachers on kids that are struggling, which I really believe in. And then at that point, hopefully, you begin to raise the entire level of education for people, because finally you have standards and something that's measurable. One last point, I think that we ought to try to teach entrepreneurship in the high schools. I think it ought to be a mandatory course. I think that we train kids in the high schools and most of the time in colleges to be employees for people. And there's nothing wrong with adding people in to be employees. But the truth is that the glory of the American society is entrepreneurship. The ability to understand capital, to gain capital, to start businesses, to employ people, and to gain independence. And that is what we don't teach kids. Now, I must tell you, I tried that. As governor of Virginia, I tried to institute entrepreneurial education in Virginia. I got nowhere. Nowhere. So don't think in any way that a governor is a dictator or a king, because I can tell you I didn't make 1 degree of impact on the teaching and education community of the state of Virginia on this concept and this idea. It's just too exotic, the idea that perhaps we should be teaching people to be independent as they go along in life, and I got nowhere. But that would be my suggestion about the next big step where we could go. Lots of hands, and I'm talking too long. I'll try to be shorter. Yes, Ty.
What's the deal with conservatives? Once we get control of Richmond, take both houses in Richmond, take both houses in Washington, and we still spend like crazy, and we can't curb spending. I mean, what are your thoughts on it?
Well, I think we have to create some vehicles for saving. Again, the reality is that, in fact, actually it's the law, that every dime you take in is going to be spent. It's a balanced budget. Every dime you take in is going to be out go. So you have to find vehicles here to prevent all that money from going out in programs. As I said, one vehicle is the rainy day fund that saves money back out of that budget from being spent, and the other was the car tax cut, and that's what they really hate, because the rainy day fund is really deferred spending, you see. That's money that's held aside for later spending if there comes a time. The car tax cut, or any tax cut, is the only genuine non-expenditure of money by the state, and that's why the left hates it so much, because that's cash that comes in, and that is power. Cash is power in governance and politics. If you can spend it, the theory is that you can buy support for your next reelection. Actually, I never thought that worked, to tell you the truth. I never thought pork barrel was all that effective. People who get it thought they were entitled to it to begin with. And people who don't get it hate you because they didn't get it. So, I don't know why politicians feel like the pork barrel is the end of all, but the challenge is that we have to create actual vehicles, in my view, in order to try to find a way to hold some of this money away from expenditure. I repeat, there will be 5 or 6 times the demands on the budget that revenue is. That's why there's this constant pressure for more revenue in order to try to spend more. And you have to have conservatives that are prepared to say, we're not going to do it, and then you have to have some vehicles to prevent that from being spent. I'm working on that. See if we can't come up with a proposal. Let me say, now, I ignore some hands over here. We'll go here and then there. Yes, ma'am.
First, we miss you in the State House and in the RC. But a question with regard to your most recent assignment, could you tell us a little bit about asymmetrical warfare and why we should be concerned?
Well, first of all, let me say that the year that I was national chairman of the party was one of the great years of my life. I really enjoyed being national chairman of the Republican National Committee, and I met fine people across the entire nation that I treasure to this day. The asymmetrical warfare means that you fight in a way that takes advantage of the enemy's weaknesses, not their strengths, and even of a society's weaknesses and not its strengths. Now, we know what America's strength is. America's strength is its freedom, its powerful economic ability, and its giant military supported by its technology. And any enemy that goes against those elements is going to lose. And that is why we stand completely ultimate today in the world as the single world power. The Soviet Union, and Howard Dean, he didn't actually say Soviet Union.
Yes,
You
he
put
did.
me on, right?
Absolutely, 4 times in the same speech.
Well, that's something. Maybe he knows something we don't know. I don't know, but you know, the Soviet Union took us on against our strength. They fought us on our economics. They fought us on our military. They fought us on our technology. And you can't beat the United States when you go at us at our strength. It's not possible because of the free society that we actually are. But if you can go against our weaknesses, if you can take our strengths and use them against us, then that's an issue. And what is our principal strength? Our freedom. Our freedom is one of our principal strengths. And this institute, above all, is dedicated to the advancement of that freedom. And that means decentralization of power. That means the freedom to be anonymous in this society, private in this society, the ability to not be watched all the time in this society. And so the enemy basically says, we'll go into that. We'll send people in anonymously. We'll send people in and do things privately, and then we'll suddenly attack in a guerrilla type of warfare. They use our own strengths against us, and that is the danger. Militarily, we are absolutely unbeatable on the field of battle when we are taken on head on. It's not possible to defeat the United States. The technology is just too great. But on the other hand, a guerrilla attack, very tough, because now suddenly they're using stealth against us, not a head-on frontal attack. They're avoiding an open battlefield. They're instead doing these kinds of attacks and then relying upon the other strength of our free society, open discussion within our media, in order to try to change the attitude of people. By the way, I've seen this before, you know. We've all seen this before. This was Vietnam. And so they weakened us. So, in fact, we had a virtual revolt in Vietnam. Another speech one day I'll tell you about the time I was at the University of Virginia in 67 to 71. You could write a book just on that. And that's what asymmetrical warfare is, and that's what the enemy is doing to us right now. Stay tuned. There's a lot still to discuss on this topic as we go forward. I believe there was a question here, then I'll come back there. Yes, sir.
To follow up, I guess, to the Republicans in spending, can you give a quick assessment of the Medicaid, or the Medicare package that just passed?
No. I don't think I'll do that. No, I don't think I'll do that. But thanks for the question.
You mentioned that there's a problem in education that we're training people to become employees instead of entrepreneurs. I'm a senior at George Washington University, and I think that for the past 4 years I've had to deal with many liberal professors in getting my degree. And I think that is a big problem in a lot of universities today, even state schools. And I just was wondering what your idea as a conservative leader would be to kind of change that fact, because I think a lot of young people in my age group wind up coming out of universities with a very left view because of the influence that professors have on them.
The question was, what do you do about the left-leaning influence of the professors at the colleges? And you know, how do you deal with that, and what is the impact that has generally on society? I mean, it's a good observation. The truth is that a left-wing philosophy is sort of the standard in America, has been all through the 20th century. That is the standard, and if you want to do something more progressive or more interesting or more challenging on behalf of people from the conservative point of view, you're seen as somewhat countercultural. So you got to understand this. I think this is really a strong point that needs to be made in this room. If you're going to come at this thing from the conservative side, you are seen as countercultural, and that means that you got to have a lot of backbone and a lot of principle and a lot of character in order to stick with it, because you're going to be seen as a little odd to be doing things like cutting taxes for working people and trying to empower people through giving them the ability to keep their own money. We say all this stuff, but then a lot of conservatives get into office, a lot of people, a lot of Republicans get into office, and they really don't believe it, you know. They really think that the standard is the right approach, and they're going to get in and run the country and run the state in a standard sort of way. It really takes a lot of guts to stick to your principles if you truly believe that you can empower people better through conservative principles. You know, what are we going to do about it? I think we just have to understand it, recognize it, and utilize facilities like the Leadership Institute and other organizations in order to build people who at least engage in debate. I might say that we all understand there was a big exception to this, and that was in the Reagan years. Ronald Reagan actually made conservatism legitimate. He really did. He made conservatism mainstream, and the conservative principles were discussed in a favorable way during those years that he was president. But boy, I tell you, it's tough. It's tough, and the educational organizations are a significant issue. Again, maybe Morton will invite me back sometime, and we'll just talk about colleges, and we'll turn the camera off and just talk about colleges, because it's sort of one of my pet things. I have great admiration for higher education. My son Jay wants to be a NASCAR driver, and I'm insisting that he get a degree. So I believe in education, but it is a real issue about higher education in this country, and particularly corporate governance of universities. The highest concentration of capital I can imagine anywhere. Virtual city-states across the country, and this is another topic for another day. Now, do I have one more, Morton, or I can? By the way, I'll talk all morning. I love this kind of thing, but I'm afraid I'm keeping you all. Yes, ma'am.
Lola Ryanch, I haven't seen you.
Yes, Lola. Nice to see you.
I just wanted to make a point on this professor thing. On Nightline, just 2 or 3 weeks ago, there was a show on the watch list. The young students in the universities kind of making a professor watch list and taking the courses of some of those very liberal professors. And probably Morton knows about this too, you may have heard about it, and kind of trying to hold them accountable and not letting them get away with all this sort of thing. So I think it would be wonderful to have a meeting on this at some point in the future.
Yeah, and Lola was discussing the fact that liberal professors can go on a watch list, and we can go and kind of watch what they're doing and the way that they teach. Look, I mean, the reality is that it's true in college and it's true in the world. And that is that you have an obligation to equip yourself with the best possible education and knowledge that you can, so that you can compete toe-to-toe with the left, which has been trained and fought through their case for an entire century. And there's no answer other than to think carefully about your principles and our conservative philosophy, and to be in a position to go toe-to-toe and to find ways to communicate it, by the way. Communications is a real challenge. You can think great thoughts, but you have to be able to communicate them in an appropriate way to the people that matter, which is the voters, and even to opinion makers. The elite opinion makers are important in this country, and you have to be able to make your case in a public forum in an articulate way. And frankly, there's no way to do that other than sound education and organizations like the Leadership Institute. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for the fun chance to be here with you today.
Thank you very much, Jim. We really appreciate your coming here, and appreciate your long friendship and support for what we're doing. One little point that I would make, 2 points that I would make. We now have a field staff in practice that we put into place this fall, revamped our recruitment for our campus leadership program, which was not part of Dan LeBeur's presentation, because that portion isn't under him. We had 4 field staffers this fall, and they visited over 100 campuses individually, each of them traveling around, and organized 47 new conservative campus groups on campuses around the country this fall. That's the first point. Second point for Lola is, because what we are doing in organizing these campus groups is helping people set up independent groups. They're not part of any Leadership Institute structure. We help these kids form independent groups. And therefore, a lot of the publicity that these conservative independent groups get doesn't happen to mention the Leadership Institute, which is fine for us. We're not doing it because we're looking for publicity, because when the publicity comes, we can send it to our donors and point out that, hey, donors, you made this possible. So we don't care if it is. I mean, the full page in Time magazine in February of this year about the group at Berkeley and their wonderful publication didn't mention us at all. But it was a full page in Time magazine about our activities. You'll be pleased to know that the Young Conservatives of Texas group that made this list of professors that are propagandizing in their classes, those are kids that we helped organize. Those are kids whom we trained. And so, yes, it's that sort of thing. We are working at it and making a lot of progress with the help of our donors. Now, it is our custom to provide our speakers with Adam Smith neckties, or in the case of ladies, Adam Smith scarves. And this was set up here, our Adam Smith necktie presentation to Governor Gilmore was set up here before he walked in the door. Well, he walked in the door wearing an Adam Smith necktie, and which was great. But it happens that this one happens to be exactly the same design that he already has on. Now, our ties are high quality merchandise, but eventually neckties do wear out. So I'm going to ask one of my staff if they would very quickly, as we adjourn, run and get something other than the red tie.
No, that's the one I want.
It's the one you want?
Yeah,
You serious?
Yeah, I've worn this tie out.
All right, you got it. Thank you.
Thank you.
You got it. All right. We made arrangements when Vernon Smith, who is now at George Mason, was being awarded the Nobel Prize for Economics. He got out of here before we could get it to him, but we sent him to wear in Stockholm for all the ceremonies 4 different Adam Smith ties, so that he could have them, because we just kind of knew he would do it. And it just so happened that the fellow who was delivering them to him got them to him just as he was going into the car to the first of the Nobel ceremonies. And he got them, and in the car, on the way to the ceremonies, he took off his old tie and he put on Adam Smith ties, and every picture of Vernon Smith in Stockholm, except for the white tie dinner, where he did not have an Adam Smith tie suitable for wearing at a white tie dinner. Every other time he wore these Adam Smith ties. Ladies and gentlemen, I invite you all to join us here on Wednesday, January 7th. Our featured speaker at the next breakfast meeting is, and this is a bit unusual, we've got 2 good Virginia conservative political leaders coming in 2 months in a row, but we have Virginia Delegate Dick Black from Loudoun County, who is often described as Mr. Conservative in the General Assembly. Those of you who are guests who have not been on a recent tour of the Leadership Institute, we would invite you to step up here, and Shannon Toronto. Shannon's here. I saw her, I believe. Did I not? Shannon's. Was she here? Do we know? Okay, staff, who's going to give the tour? Let's have a staff volunteer to tour.
One of us will take care of it. I think Shannon might be giving a tour right now. Maybe when she's not here.
I hope not. But anyhow, Chris Korish will step up here and we'll take you on a tour of the building if you want. We encourage you to come by. Thank you for coming, and again, thank you, Jim Gilmore. Terrific presentation. You are a model that we would love to have replicated many times, not only in the Commonwealth of Virginia, but all across the nation. Thank you all, and good morning.